Heinz Wilhelm Guderian was born in June of 1888 in the Prussian city of Kulm, now Chełmno in Poland. Like many young Prussians of his day, the military was less a career choice than a family expectation. His father was a professional officer, and so, almost inevitably, Guderian entered the army as well. But what set him apart early on wasn't just his competence, it was his obsession with new technology. At a time when most officers still thought of cavalry charges and infantry lines, Guderian had his eye on the future. World War I was his classroom. He served mostly in signals and communications units, giving him a unique perspective on how vital speed and coordination were on the battlefield. While other officers were stuck in trenches, Guderian was literally wiring together the arteries of the German army. He saw firsthand that wars of attrition were not only brutal but disastrously inefficient. Technology, he realized, could cut through the stalemate. Fast forward to the 1920s, the Treaty of Versailles had stripped Germany of tanks, heavy artillery and aircraft, but restrictions only sharpened the ambitions of men like Guderian. Secretly, the Reichswehr studied modern warfare, often in cooperation with the Soviet Union of all places. In Russia, German officers ran clandestine tank schools, tested equipment, and developed doctrines they weren't supposed to even think about back home. Guderian was in the thick of it. He devoured the writings of military thinkers like J.F.C. Fuller and Basil Liddell Hart in Britain, men who had already begun theorizing about mechanized warfare. But Guderian didn't just copy their ideas, he took them, refined them, and pushed them further. His vision, entire divisions of tanks working together, supported by motorized infantry, artillery, and close air support. No more tanks sprinkled here and there to support infantry. Instead, tanks would be the tip of the spear, smashing through enemy lines at lightning speed, never giving the enemy time to regroup. By the early 1930s, he had become one of the leading advocates for armoured warfare in Germany. His book, Achtung, Panzer, published in 1937, was both a rallying cry and a blueprint. It wasn't just theory, it was a demand for change. He argued that modern wars would be won by those who embraced mobility, communication, and combined arms, not those who clung to the trenches of 1914. And he wasn't wrong. When Hitler rose to power, he found in Guderian someone whose vision aligned perfectly with his own aggressive ambitions. In 1935, Germany openly reintroduced tanks, forming the panzer divisions that Guderian had long dreamed of. By 1938, he was promoted to lead the fast-growing armoured forces. And then came the test. Poland, 1939. While much of the world still imagined war would be fought like the Great War, Guderian's tanks rolled in with speed and ferocity. Within weeks, Poland was carved apart. Critics often downplay the role of Blitzkrieg in Poland, arguing that the Polish army was poorly equipped and the campaign was more traditional than later myth suggests. But one thing was clear. Guderian's methods worked. France, 1940, however, was his masterpiece. The Allies expected the Germans to attack through Belgium, as they had in 1914. The French even built the massive Maginot Line to stop a frontal assault. But Guderian proposed something audacious. Strike through the Ardennes forest, a region everyone thought was impassable for tanks. The plan was approved. What followed was one of the most shocking campaigns in military history. Guderian's 19th Panzer Corps smashed through the Ardennes, crossed the Meuse River, and tore open the Allied front. At one point, he disobeyed orders to halt and kept pushing forward, racing toward the English Channel. Within weeks, France had collapsed. Blitzkrieg wasn't just theory anymore, it was terrifying reality. The world had witnessed a new kind of war, and at its center stood Heinz Guderian. But success brought tension. Guderian was brilliant, but he was also arrogant, outspoken, and prone to clashing with superiors, including Hitler himself. On the Eastern Front, his panzers initially drove deep into Soviet territory during Operation Barbarossa in 1941. He achieved massive encirclements, capturing hundreds of thousands of Red Army troops. Yet, as the Germans pushed toward Moscow, disagreements erupted. Guderian wanted to keep advancing rapidly, to strike at the Soviet heart. Hitler, obsessed with seizing Ukraine and other territories, redirected forces. The result? Delays, overstretched supply lines, and the brutal Russian winter closing in. By December 1941, Guderian's forces were exhausted, freezing, and facing counterattacks. He argued furiously with Hitler over strategy. The Führer demanded no retreat, but Guderian knew holding impossible positions meant disaster. When he refused to obey, Hitler dismissed him. For nearly 2 years, the architect of Blitzkrieg sat on the sidelines, sidelined by the very regime he had helped empower. In 1943, as Germany's situation worsened, Hitler grudgingly recalled Guderian, appointing him Inspector General of Armoured Troops. His job was to rebuild shattered panzer forces and oversee tank development. He pushed for better designs, most famously backing the Panther tank, which combined firepower, armour and mobility. But by then, Germany was on the defensive, and even Guderian's innovations couldn't turn the tide. In July 1944, after the failed assassination attempt on Hitler, Guderian was made Chief of the General Staff, the highest position in the army. Yet by then, it was a poisoned chalice. Germany was collapsing on all fronts, and Guderian was trapped between military reality and Hitler's delusions. He argued constantly for retreats and tactical withdrawals to preserve forces, while Hitler demanded last stands and suicidal offensives. It was a clash the general could never win. As the Reich crumbled, Guderian's influence waned. He was dismissed again in March 1945, just weeks before the final collapse of Nazi Germany. Captured by the Allies, he spent years in captivity, but was never charged at the Nuremberg trials. The reason? Blitzkrieg, for all its devastation, was not a war crime. Guderian had been a professional soldier, not directly involved in atrocities. This distinction remains controversial. Was he simply a soldier doing his job, or was he complicit in enabling a regime built on terror? Historians still debate it. After his release, Guderian lived quietly, writing memoirs that painted himself as the pragmatic, apolitical soldier who clashed with Hitler but never embraced Nazi ideology. His book, Panzer Leader, became a classic, shaping how post-war generations understood German armoured warfare. But it's worth remembering, memoirs are always self-serving. While Guderian certainly argued with Hitler, he also basked in the fame and promotions the Nazi regime had given him. His legacy, like Blitzkrieg itself, is complicated. And that's what makes Heinz Guderian such a fascinating figure. He wasn't just a general, he was a symbol of a revolution in warfare. His ideas reshaped how armies fought, from World War II to the modern doctrines of maneuver warfare still studied today. Yet he was also a reminder that brilliance in battle can serve dark masters. His tanks rolled not in the name of freedom, but in the service of conquest and dictatorship. So the next time you hear the word Blitzkrieg, remember the man behind the storm. A visionary, yes, a pioneer, undoubtedly, but also a man whose genius was bound to one of history's darkest chapters. Now, I want to hear from you. What do you think of Heinz Guderian? Was he a pure military innovator, unfairly tied to Hitler's crimes? Or was he a willing accomplice who helped unleash devastation on Europe? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I love reading your insights. And don't forget, like this video if you enjoyed it, share it with fellow history buffs, subscribe for more deep dives, and ring that notification bell so you never miss a new upload. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.